Hi guys! So in the last video I gave you a quick introduction to how our immune system helps us fight off cancerous cells. However, today I want to talk about the potential role the immune system can play in treating cancers that are already well established. So traditionally, cancer treatment has revolved around chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and surgery. And while these can be effective, they aren't very specific and they can cause a lot of harm to the rest of our healthy cells. So seeing as our body already has a mechanism for killing off cancer cells, many researchers have been working on the idea of immunotherapies that can treat cancer. So basically, we want to be able to retrain and reactivate our immune cells so that they can start working properly again and remove the cancerous cells. So if you like science and keep up with the Nobel Prize Awards, then you might already be familiar with this concept, because this year's Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Professor James P. Allison and Professor Toshiko Honjo for their discovery of cancer therapy by inhibition of negative immune regulation. So to explain this, I'm first going to elaborate a bit more on what I shared with you in the last video. So when a cell becomes cancerous, it should be destroyed by our T cells. However, if the cancer cell is able to outsmart the immune system, it can inactivate the T cell and then go undetected. To inactivate the T cell, the cancer cell causes the addition of what's been referred to as molecular breaks on the surface of the T cell. And these breaks are essentially inhibitory receptors that sit on the surface of the T cell and inhibit immune activation. So during the 1990s, James P. Allison, who was working at the University of California, discovered the T cell protein CTLA4, and this was found to be one of these molecular breaks. So he began trying to block CTLA4 in the hope that this would then reactivate the T cell. To do this, he used an antibody that he had developed to block the binding of CTLA4. So antibodies are normally produced by B cells as part of our adaptive immune response. However, here Allison was manipulating that process because he was introducing an exogenous antibody that he had created in order to try and block the binding site of CTLA4. Now, around the same time, in the early 1990s, Professor Toshiko Honjo discovered PD-1, another inhibitory protein that becomes expressed on the surface of T cells. And his work showed that although the mechanism is slightly different to CTLA4, the principle was the same. So PD-1 also acts as a molecular brake, and he began to work on anti-PD-1 therapies. So collectively, these have been referred to as immune checkpoint therapies, and I thought I'd give you a bit of information now on each of these therapies and how they've progressed. So starting with CTLA4, and the anti-CTLA4 drug, which I actually can't pronounce, so even though I've tried it a million times, I'm not going to bother now, but the spelling's there. And as I mentioned before, CTLA4 was first discovered by James P. Allison in the 1990s, and then following this, there were numerous in vivo studies that proved very successful at reactivating T cell function and essentially curing mice of various different cancers. So in 2007, human trials began in patients with melanoma, and in 2010, a study showed that advanced melanoma patients treated with anti-CTLA4 survived on average 10 months compared to the 6 months of survival for patients treated on an experimental vaccine. And this led to the FDA approval of the therapy for treatment in advanced melanoma in 2011. In 2009, human clinical trials began in patients with prostate cancer, and in 2016, a phase 2 study began, which combined both anti-CTLA4 and the anti-PD-1 drug, which I'll explain more about in a minute. So other anti-CTLA4 trials have also begun in both small and non-small lung cancers, as well as bladder cancer. And in 2018, the FDA approved the treatment for patients with renal cell carcinoma. So as I mentioned, nivolumab is an anti-PD-1 therapy, as is pembrolizumab, which I really am struggling to say as well. But essentially, These are two anti-PD-1 drugs that I thought I'd focus on this tutorial. However, there are a couple more listed in the literature as well. So similarly to CTLA4, PD-1 was also discovered in the 1990s, and again there were numerous studies in vivo that showed it was extremely successful at curing mice from cancer. So in 2012 it was reported that a load of human clinical trials in a number of different cancer types had been highly promising. So in 2014, both the Japanese regulatory authorities and the FDA approved anti-PD-1 drugs for treating melanoma. And in 2015, the European Medicines Agency, EMA, and FDA approved them for the use in melanoma and squamous cell lung cancer. Now, between 2016 and 17, the FDA also approved the use of anti-PD-1 drugs in small and non-small cell lung cancers, head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, and Hodgkin lymphoma. And in 2018, this was expanded into both renal cell carcinoma and advanced cervical cancer. Now, I'm not saying I've listed everything here, I may have missed some, but really I just wanted to give you an idea of how many different cancers these drugs are being used to treat, and how in some cases studies have begun to combine both these anti-CTLA4 and anti-PD-1 therapies to try and improve the efficacy even further. Now, while all this sounds great, as with any drug, there are still many challenges. So, for instance, these drugs have been reported to have variable response rates, which can range from 15 to 90%. So not everyone treated with an immune checkpoint therapy will actually see the benefits. And in some cases, people have been shown to have adverse effects, and these can be quite severe or in some cases even fatal. So much work still needs to be done to try and figure out which patients will respond and which patients are at risk from adverse effects. And finally, because these drugs are still in their infancy, there is an economic cost associated with them, which could be problematic and mean that some people don't get these treatments. So personally, I think the pros of these drugs strongly outweigh the cons, and I think with more and more studies that hopefully they will get even better. So I hope you liked this video. I've attached some useful links in the description below in case you want to do some more reading. And continuing along this sort of theme, in my next video I'm going to be talking about engineered T cells for treating cancer. So make sure you subscribe and come back for the next one. Thank you.